It's apple picking season. We got to talk about Honeycrisp apples and why they're expensive. There is a reason. It is not just high demand. It's not just that everybody wants them. There's some things going on with this apple that make it expensive. The first thing you have to know about Honeycrisp, the tree, it is a diva. The Honeycrisp tree doesn't want to be alive as much as some other trees do. So Honeycrisp is from, I think, the University of Minnesota apple breeding program, and it survived some really brutally cold temperatures that killed everything else. That's part of why it got saved from the breeding program, even though you could argue that maybe it shouldn't have been. So the Honeycrisp tree really struggles with moving enough calcium to the fruit. And you're like, calcium? We don't eat apples for calcium. They still have a little bit of calcium in there. The calcium is really important. The thing that makes apples crunchy is pectin. It's in the cell walls of the apple, and that's what gives them that like crunchy texture. All fruit have some pectin in their cell walls, but apples, tend to have a lot, and Honeycrisp especially. So the problem is the apple, because it's so crunchy, needs a lot of pectin and calcium in there. It needs that calcium supply to be good, but the tree is bad at moving calcium. What that does is you get a lot of apples that don't get enough calcium to form properly. They get something called bitter pit, which is when you just have a lot of gray, brown, dead divots all over the apple. And it's one of those things where you can look at it and you say, oh, that apple's just ugly. I don't mind apples with spots. It's so much worse than just spots. Those little pits didn't get enough calcium, and that means those cells are going to die. You know that saying, one bad apple spoils the whole bunch? So when you're storing apples, you have a whole bunch of them, and if one of them starts to rot because it's got dead necrotic tissue, they all rot. So with Honeycrisp, it's really prone to getting bitter pit, and you have to yank all those bitter pit apples out and do not try to store them. If they have bitter pit, you have to throw them out, not into the trash. Usually you make juice out of them. Juice and cider and applesauce and processing, that's where all the bad apples go. And so the price you are going to get for juicing apples is very, very low. And with a Honeycrisp orchard, a lot of your apples are going to wind up going to juice. They're going to have to get sold at juice price, which means the ones that are left over, the ones that are good enough to eat whole, you have to charge a lot of money for them. That is why Honeycrisp apples are expensive. There's been a lot of efforts to cross Honeycrisp with other things and make apples that are stronger trees that don't need as much babying and can survive in the wild a little bit more. Well, here's the other thing with Honeycrisp. Once Honeycrisp really took off, you had people planting Honeycrisp in parts of the country where it didn't really like the weather. It was too hot. And so that's why if you're too far away from the Canadian border, the Honeycrisp apples are not very good. That's because they've either been shipped a long way or they were planted in places that are too far south for them to really be happy. So especially if you're in the southern half of the United States, you might have better luck with some other crisp apple varieties that are not Honeycrisp that have a little bit more weather tolerance to warmer areas than Honeycrisp does. So if you live in the southern half of the US and you've ever eaten a Honeycrisp and you thought, what's the big deal? These aren't that good. That's what's going on. We shouldn't try to make them be down here. They don't like that. Honeycrisp is already angry enough about being alive as it is. We don't need to make their life worse by trying to bring them down south. So that's that in honor of apple picking season. Have a good one.